recording has started. So Stéphane, please.
Yes, thank you. Okay, a quick introduction. I'm Stéphane Polteau. I'm a researcher at the Institute for Energy Technology, IFE, just between Oslo and Gardermoen. And my background is in geology and a bit of geochemistry and a bit of everything. But today I'll talk about this stable isotopes and their use as natural traces. I'm just going to be I will try to keep it very simple. And so I'll start by saying what are elements. And the elements are made of protons, electrons, and neutrons. The only hydrogen doesn't have a neutron. But you can see here, carbon has 6 protons and 6 neutrons. And it turns out that you have 118 elements like this, and they populate the periodic table. So why I'm talking about this and not isotopes directly, it's because you see here, you have, I put composition of air. It's 45% carbon, 28% oxygen, 15% nitrogen, 7% hydrogen, and 5% sulfur. The thing is, if you only measure the composition, the elemental composition of hair, your hair, my hair, most of everybody's hair would have the same composition. So to differentiate the different type of hair, we could use, of course, DNA. But DNA just tells you if you're related to someone. So it doesn't tell you where you're coming from. It's also DNA is for living things, so you don't get DNA in the rocks. So we use isotopes for geolocation to tell where something is coming from, or also to identify geological processes. And we can measure isotopes on water, gas, rocks, organic matters. So the isotope of hydrogen, you have 2. You have deuterium, H2. It has an extra neutron, and you have tritium. And tritium is there is someone that needs to be muted maybe. Yeah, and tritium is not stable, is radioactive. So it decays with time. And you can see the half-life is 12.3 years. But so in this talk, we're interested about the stable isotopes and between hydrogen and deuterium. And you can see here, by adding 1 neutron, you more or less double the mass of hydrogen. So that means that there is some reactions that will occur, and they will prefer to use the light or the heavy hydrogen over the other isotope. And this difference, we can measure it, and it's expressed as this ratio. So when the ratio is high, we call it heavy, and then you have more than the heavy isotope. And when the ratio is small, the isotope ratio is light. So it's the same for carbon. Carbon, you have carbon 12, 13, 14. 14 is radiogenic, is used for dating materials. We look at the carbon 12 and 13. And between 12 and 13, there is 1 extra neutron, and it gives a 8% mass difference. So again, here the carbon fractionate with mass, meaning that some of the reaction will prefer the light or the heavy over the other isotope. And we look also at oxygen. Oxygen is 16 atomic mass, so you add 1 neutron, and the mass difference is 12.5% between and we look at usually the ratio between 16 and 18. So 2 neutrons extra gives a 12.5% mass difference between the heavy and light, and oxygen will fractionate with mass, and oxygen usually fractionate depending on the temperature. So it's used to as a paleo thermometer. We're also going to talk about strontium in this talk, and in particular, we look at the 87/86. So it's a heavy isotope. And here, if you add one extra neutron, the mass difference is not so much. So the isotopic system 87/86 will not fractionate with mass. And this strontium isotopic system then is used as a natural tracer. Go back to how we used the isotopes. Here on the left, you have a range of values of in hydrogen isotopes, and on the right in carbon isotopes, and you have different ranges of this isotopic ratio, depending on processes here or type of rocks, and the same on the other side. You can see that some processes like corrosion has quite a wide range, and some have a very small range. So it's you can use it to identify different processes. Same for carbon. The thing is, you have quite a bit of overlap, right, between the different values. So how do we go about it? We plot the carbon and hydrogen in the same plot. So here it's hydrogen here at the bottom here, and on this axis you have the carbon, and you can see here two points, and the isotopic composition indicate that this is for methane, natural gas. It indicates that they have the same origin, so it's mature gas associated with oil. To go back to the composition, you can see here that actually the two gas have a different composition, right? So elemental composition, isotopic composition, it could be different. The isotopes are adding an extra dimension to your data, because just with the composition, you wouldn't be able to tell where how this natural gas formed. Yeah, so we use the carbon isotopic composition to determine the origin of the gas, and this is relevant for in oil exploration or monitoring of leakage of sediment from sediments on the seafloor. Because you have, you can see here, you have different compositions depending on where you are, and if, for example, you have gas that is sourced from deep, from within a hydrocarbon reservoir, it will leak at the surface, and it will have a signature that represent thermogenic processes. So between around -30. The shallower you go, if it's microbial, the carbon isotopic composition of the methane would become even more negative, so lighter, and it would indicate microbial biogenic origin. So when we just got a project now, it's called WellFate. It's funded by the Research Council of Norway and Equinor and Vår Energy, together with the University of Tromsø, Stavanger, and University of Oslo. Here we will look at abandoned wells offshore that are leaking. So you can see here is a natural sip. You have gas sips into the water column, and you have two wells here, one here and the other one. And both wells are associated with gas flares. And so far there's I don't think there is any samples that were taken on the NCS of this gas, and we need to know where it's coming from. Is it from the shallow biogenic, or is it from the reservoir? So we sample the gas, and we can determine this using the carbon and oxygen, carbon and hydrogen isotopes on the collected gas. This is relevant for of course, for abandoned wells, to know where if the methane is coming from the deep, that means there is a real problem with your well. And if it's coming from the shallow, that will mean that whatever gas is produced by the microbe just below the seafloor is just preferentially leaking along the gas, the well pathway. This is a video that was published on NRCO about 2-3 years ago, showing gas leaking on the seafloor. And that's what started this well fate project. Now, another thing about methane, I talked about the one coming out from the seafloor. This is the one in the atmosphere. And if you remember, the amount of CO2 that was emitted during the lockdown, during the COVID, decreased. But the amount of methane that is emitted, that can be measured, the concentration of methane in the atmosphere, kept on increasing. And that together, it's increasing, but the isotopic composition of the carbon of this methane in the atmosphere is becoming more and more negative, so lighter and lighter. And we don't really understand why. And the main idea is that you have increased methane production in the tropics. And if it goes more and more negative, so lighter and lighter value, it's probably related to microbial activity. And this is then the European Commission published a call for proposal where they want to have a group of scientists to quantify and understand the methane emission and sinks. So we're working on this proposal. Then for H2O, this is a simple example also of fractionation from isotopic fractionation from a simple process when you look at the water cycle. So you have evaporation, and when you evaporate, you will preferentially put in the atmosphere the lighter elements. And when it would rain the heavier down. So you have, sea is heavy, water vapor is light, glaciers are light, and this you can measure, you can characterize the water cycle using the oxygen isotopes. And they show variation on the global scale here, where you have heavy value along the equator, and lighter and lighter as you go to the high latitudes. And this is related to precipitation. As you go further and further away, the isotopic composition will become lighter and lighter. So it's also a good system to monitor climate change. Strontium isotopes, again, they're a little bit different. I told you before, they don't fractionate with mass. They're used as a natural tracer, and they've been used before for understanding the migration of populations. The reason is that you have a strontium isotopic composition that is from the bedrock, and when you and this isotopic composition, so this ratio of the 87/86 is transferred from the bedrock into the soil by erosion, and then assimilated by the plant, and then the isotopic ratio will go into the animals that eat it and the humans that consume those animals. So in the end, the strontium isotopic composition can be related to a particular geological province. And that is why it's used for studying migration of populations. It's been used. we want to use it for saying, you know, this is the Yellow Star dig, and they have a lot of artifacts from the Viking Age, and we can geolocate the origin of those artifacts. So where they produced locally or where they brought from far away. So there are several settlements in Norway, Sweden, Iceland, Canada. So by using the strontium isotopic ratio of those artifacts and relating it to the strontium isotopic of the land, we could try to characterize the trading routes, at the Viking Age. There's been some cold cases before. This is the Isdal woman. It's a woman that died about 46, 47 years ago, and no one knew where she was, no one knew who she was. And so what they did is they took some teeth and they analyzed for the strontium, and they could say that she was not from Norway, probably, I think it was Germany. With the hair, it's a bit similar. You can use strontium, but also oxygen, because the hair takes its signature from the water when you take a shower. And there you can, if you cut the strands of hair at different length, you can see if the person traveled. So you can see if you find someone dead in the woods, you would be able to say if they looked, if no one recognized them, you would be able to say if they are from nearby or if they come from far and if they have traveled. It's the same with the teeth. So in the teeth for the strontium, it's like a tree ring. The inside inside the teeth would show the composition of where you grew up, and as you go outside towards the outer part of the tooth, you would get the trajectory of that individual. It's also used for authentication of food products. So does the product that you buy, is it really coming from, does it fit what is written on the label? So we can check. There's also some stories of people that dived and they recovered some champagne bottles or bubbly, and they didn't know where it was from. They analyzed the wine and they said they could even pinpoint exactly which farm it was coming from. So we've been working also on a little bit on this. We've been together with NIVA and NILU. We have NIVA collected 1,000 water lake samples, and NILU collected some moss samples over the years. And we have analyzed about 50, 60 lake water samples spread all over Norway for oxygen, deuterium, and strontium to make those maps. So where we can tie Viking remains to a particular location. So it's this is fresh from the lab. I think it's one of my last slide. What we're using the strontium isotopic ratio 87/86 for characterizing the fluid communication in the reservoir. So the strontium does not fractionate with mass. I told you is a natural tracer. But the ratio in this case in oil reservoir, the ratio of the strontium will not change except if you mix with different water. And this is here the profile is the profile of the formation water composition. So you can see that so the trends of the strontium are used to characterize the fluid connectivity in reservoirs, where the different section of the parts of the trends are used to identify different aquifers. So constant composition here or indicate homogeneity and support connectivity in the reservoir. Mixing trends with the irregular trend indicate limited connectivity, and the breaks in the trends indicate the location of low permeability barriers. So here, the smoothness of the trends and the scale of the breaks is a direct degree of homogenization, which is controlled by diffusion, and it's a slow process. It's slower than pressure, so you not necessarily have a pressure break where you have a strontium break in your profile. And so the strontium data amplify reservoir heterogeneities. And this is important because here when someone drill exploration well, and you have a discovery, you want to know if your reservoir is open like a sponge, or is it full of little boxes that you need to be careful how you will produce it. And it's the same for CO2 storage sites. Can you inject into an open system, or is it all into little compartments? So in the end, isotopes are important to understand the world around us. They can be used in geology, in biology, in archaeology, in many different types of disciplines. They're used as traces for provenance or processes. And these tools are used you should use them in combination with other data. But really, the use depends on the creativity of the user. So anything can go.